in my study, I've come to the conclusion again, after reading many frameworks and looking at various things, I was intrigued by a framework called Cynefin, C-Y-N-E-F-I-N framework. Basically what it does is defines an organization and puts it into, say, 4 quadrants, right? And in the middle, you draw and you say that's disorder, right? So I'm trying to talk about my organization, and in the middle is disorder. So in the lower right-hand quadrant, we have the obvious sector. So in the obvious sector, what we have are things where we use best practices, because these are things that are well known to people and everybody should understand. So if we're looking at that from a risk assessment point of view, then we should be using the tool of a quantitative risk assessment, because we have lots of data. These are things that we do all the time. We have lots of data, and we should be, trying to make those as good as a good process as possible. If you move up, so going up is the next quadrant is called the complicated. Right? So we're starting to get a little bit more complicated. So there are no best practices, so we use things like good practice. So in the information security world, we're talking about things like the Code of Practice in ISO 27002. If you're talking about service management, then you start to talk about things like ITIL. So these are good practices. And then the next one moving over is the quadrant is called complex, right? So now we're into very complex things. Here what we have to do is look for emergent practices. So, what are we doing in this particular area that other people are doing? So we start to look at benchmarking and things like that to understand what other people are doing. But we can't use quantitative risk assessment, because these could be what we call the dragon knights, which are sort of a flavor of the black swans, but happen more frequently, right? So they don't happen enough that we have enough data that we can actually do a quantitative risk assessment, and we might not even thought of the scenario, so we can't do, qualitative risk assessment. So here we have to use complexity management tools, and there's a number of tools that people are selling. And then the last quadrant they call chaos, right? So, and then between the obvious, which is where we're doing the best practices, so each one of these has sort of a little cliff, like I can fall from complicated into complex very quickly, and I can fall from complicated back in, after it's been around a while, we'll put in best practice, so now it's into the obvious one. But the biggest cliff, if you want to call it, is from obvious to chaos, right? So we're working away, we think we're doing a really good job on our process, and all of a sudden we find that we're wildly out of control and we're in a chaotic environment, right? So you have to manage these, make sure that you're understanding the relationship between them and making sure that you're not falling from an obvious environment to a chaotic environment, right?